as I was on the golf course the other day when you're out on that limb. But he is a friend. He's a helper. He's a mentor. He loves the Lord, and he's been a big help to us this week. Let's hear him gladly tonight. God bless you, sir.
All right, Pastor. I didn't have a card. I didn't have anything like that. But happy birthday. This is my gift to you.
Oh, wow.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
It's a tithing envelope. It's a, there's a missions, there's a missions faith promise card in there with a further commitment on it that's already in your name turned in. If I thought you were a church of faith, I'd just go ahead and have you vote on these missionaries with the faith that the rest of that's going to come in, which is going to be about $300 a month, not a month, a week, $300 a week. But that's no hill for a climber. It really isn't. That's right. And boy, it does bring me to the message tonight, though. I love it. I love it. I love it that you're not there yet. I love it that we don't come to the last service of the conference and coast. Amen. I love that there's still a challenge there. There's still more to do. I want you to think about that. Some of you could do, what are you willing to do without? Are you willing to fast one meal a week? Figure the cost of that meal. Some of you drink Starbucks. I know, I can tell that. You know, $2.50 for gas. I'll complain and gripe and fuss about $2.50 a gallon for gas. But $4 for a cup of coffee, that seems about right. Oh, my. Husband-wife relationships are interesting. There's a couple, everybody has conflicts, you know. You have things that you disagree on, and you get those things worked out over years. You know, this year, my wife and I will very soon, we will celebrate 55 years of marriage. Very soon. And in May, the end of May. And so, but you have things you just need to work out. You know, you have different opinions about things, different ways you did things growing up, and sometimes it's hard to mesh those things, what my family did and the way your family did it, and now what our family is going to do. And it's a little difficult sometimes. And this lady, she really did something that irritated her husband. She frequently left her keys in the car, in the switch. And they would talk about that. And he talked very plainly about that. Honey, sweetheart, people steal cars when they have to break into them and break the ignition and everything else. I mean, it's like an invitation, take my car whenever you leave the keys. And she'd work on it, and she'd apologize for doing it, and he'd find out about it, and I'm sorry. Honey, you know, and sometimes they get a little loud. But nevertheless, she's in the grocery store. She's grocery shopping, and you ladies have those things. I don't know really what it is, but there's a little card on your key ring, and you give it to them at the checkout, and you get some kind of a discount or something like that. If you're with Kroger or whoever or whatever like that, they'll give you a discount on that. So she's finished her shopping. She's headed to the checkout, and she's looking for her card for the discount. And her keys are not in her purse. And she's, oh, no. Oh, my. Oh, Lord, help the card to be there. Help, you know, oh, yeah. And so she checks out, pays full price, goes out, and she goes out, and she looks for a car, and the car's not there. And she looks, and maybe I parked somewhere else, and the car is not there. So she makes the call. She calls the cops. And the cops come, and they take down the information. They get all the information. They get make, model, color, all the stuff, even license number, everything. Get everything about it, perfect description, everything. They know exactly what it is. And then she's got to make that phone call that she doesn't want to make. And so she calls in her tenderest, most emotional voice. And he answers the phone, hello. And she says, honey, I am so sorry. I'm at the grocery store and I finished my shopping. I don't have my keys and I came out to look for the car. I left my keys in the car and the car is gone. And I called the cops and the cops have come and I've given them the information and everything like that, but I just don't know what to do. Can you come pick me up? He said, you didn't leave your keys in the car. She said, what? He said, I dropped you off. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. All right, well, come pick me up. He said, I will, as soon as I can convince this cop I didn't steal this car. I don't know whether that happened or not, but it's believable that something like that would happen. All right. You're good folks to preach to. I love coming here. I love being with you. I love Dr. Gray. And I love your pastor. And I really do. I love the church family, his family, Caleb and the family. I thank God for what he's given you here as a church. Tomorrow's your birthday. Tomorrow's your birthday. You're going to be 62 tomorrow. And that's a wonderful thing. Now, I'm going to tell you, at some point in time, the best thing this church can do for yourselves, for this church, one of the best things, may not be the best thing, but it's one of the best things this church could do for this church is to send your pastor to Israel. It will change his vision of this. Now, it won't change his doctrine, but it'll change the way he sees this book. You cannot go to Israel and ever again talk about the Garden of Gethsemane without seeing it. You can't talk about the Mount of Olives without seeing it. You cannot talk about the view of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives without seeing it. You cannot talk about Bethany, Jericho, Jordan Valley, the Sea of Galilee, Capernaum, Nazareth. You cannot talk about Mount Carmel. You cannot talk about those things, read about those things without your mind being affected. Because when you see it, it goes from black and white to technicolor. And it enhances not your abilities, but it enhances your mental thinking about where Jesus went, the distances that were covered. And it just changes, the Word of God. I don't know. Yeah, I do. I somewhat know why that does that. But I encourage you to do that. And for you personally, if you love Israel, the best way to support Israel is to visit Israel. Isn't it scary over there? Isn't it scary? Well, I've probably told you this before. But if you go to Israel, you've got to be prepared for people yelling and hollering, and for people in the streets and marching and making noise and maybe even throwing things and all this kind of stuff. You've got to be prepared for that. But once you get out of New York, everything's okay. Everything's okay. I've taken many people who were scared to go the first time. I've taken many people the second time. I've never taken anyone who was scared to go the second time. That's amazing how the news does that. Open your Bible, 1 Chronicles chapter 21. 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st Chronicles, 1st Chronicles. David has sinned in numbering the people. Now, there's nothing wrong with numbering folks unless you are dependent upon numbers, unless you're trusting in numbers. And David wanted to get a little ego trip about how big his army was and how much he had done and all of these things. And God said, don't do that. And David said, I'm going to do it anyhow. And he did. And God said, okay, Gad, prophet Gad. This is not Nathan, this is Gad. He says, Gad, go see him and tell him you've got three choices. You can either have 3 years of famine, 3 months of being destroyed before your enemies, or you can take 3 days of God sending pestilence in the land. And in 3 days, 70,000 people in Israel have died in 3 days. Can you imagine if in 3 days we had 70,000 people in this country die? David said, I've sinned. It's not the people. Don't join them. Don't judge them. It's me. I've sinned. Let me fall to the mercies of the Lord. Let me not fall to the hand of man. And God said, there will be 3 days of pestilence in the land. 70,000 people have died. I'm going to begin reading at verse 18. Then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and set up an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And David went up at the saying of Gad, and that which he spake in the name of the Lord. And Ornan turned back and saw the angel, and his 4 sons with him hid themselves. Now Ornan was threshing wheat. Now I'm not going to read any further than that right now, but that leads us into the message on Ornan the Jebusite. I want you to see, first of all, the uniqueness of his person. Now, he's mentioned by name 10 times in these few verses. 3 of those times, he is called Ornan the Jebusite. Now, I want you to understand, if you don't already know, and if you do know, I'm reminding you that the city of Jerusalem was conquered by David. And he moved his capital from Hebron to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem became the capital city. 10 times Ornan is mentioned. 3 times he's called the Jebusite. It was a Jebusite city. It was ruled by a people called the Jebusites. So, Ornan is an original inhabitant of the city. His name means strong. Now, I do not know all that took place about this, but somehow, whenever the city was conquered by David, he did not become bitter about that, and he did not become rebellious against David, but somehow he submitted himself to the kingship of King David. And he recognizes him. Every indication from the passage is that he recognizes King David as his king. And he has come to understand something about the worship of David's God. Now, I do not know that he was a believer or came to that, but there are indications that he may have not just known something about David's God, but that he knew David's God because he knew how to worship God. He knew what was required for worship. And whenever David came and met him to worship, he knew what was needed to worship God. So it may be that he knew something about that. I want you to see the unfolding of his position. Ornan owned a piece of ground. I do not know that he knew the history of what he owned. You know, there's some people own a place and all of a sudden some people say this has historical significance. And, you know, wow, this is really something they find out. And they did not have any idea about that. Ornan owned the piece of ground where Abraham had taken Isaac to offer him as sacrifice unto God. I don't know that David knew that, but God knew it. And I know that Ornan and David also, neither of them knew what was going to take place there in the future. Now, the temple's going to be built there. It's called now the Temple Mount. And it was on that same outcropping of limestone rock just north of the city, just outside the wall, not inside the city, which was forbidden by Jewish law. But outside the city, Jesus was going to be crucified. It's quite a place that Ornan owned. He had no idea what was in his possession. Now, may I make it personal? What do you have that's in your possession? You really don't know what value it is. You really don't know what God can do with it. Now, I'm not talking about a piece of property that you own, although it may be that. I'm talking about something that's part of you. I'm talking about something that is part of your history, that's part of your growing up. It may be a unique part of your growing up, as this was a unique place in Israel. It may be an abuse you suffered whenever you were a child. It may be an unkindness that was done to you by a Sunday school teacher. It may be a hurt that you had in a church. I hear so many people that say, yeah, you know, I don't go to church anymore. You know, I was in a church one time. They didn't do me right. They didn't do me right. Well, if you've been around church wrong, you've been in church where they didn't do you right. Yeah. And if you've been in the ministry long, you've had experiences where they didn't do you right. But that's people. That's not God. Amen. But God can take that thing in your life which is unique to you and do a wonderful thing through your life with that. You don't know what the future may be. You really don't know why that's in your history, and you don't know how to deal with it where you are. But God can give something wonderful in the future because of that thing. You say, well, that doesn't make it right. What happened? No, it doesn't make it right. But all things can work together for good to them who love God. Amen. So, you know, don't be bound there the rest of your life. Don't live your life there. Whenever I first started the church in Florida, we were in a small building, and that's all we had was that one room. I mean, that was the room. The room we met in. We had a nice piece of property, but we just had that one room. That was it. And we were having some kind of a youth meeting in the very beginning of the church, very early days of the church. So a few of the teenagers were there, and we were doing something, I don't know what. And one of the kids came and said, Pastor, there's a guy outside who wants to see you. He said, he looks like a homeless fella. And so I went to the door. And whenever I went out there, he started talking to me, and he said, do you know a fellow named Ken Babcock? I said, yes, I do. I said, I love Brother Babcock. He said, if you knew what I know about him, you wouldn't love him. Now, this man is 50 years old. He's on a bicycle. He has everything loaded in plastic bags, hanging on the handlebars of the bicycle. I said, well, you know, I don't know what you're talking about, but I said, I love him, and what I know of him, he is a great man. He said, he's my daddy. I said, really? I said, I've heard him talk about you. He loves you. He said, well, he may say that, but when I was 12 years old, he beat me. Now, I didn't say this, but what I thought was, you probably needed a beating. And I was not unkind, but I asked him. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 50 years old. I said, now I don't want to be smart aleck or anything like that, but don't you think it's about time you get over that? So I don't know what's in your past, but don't stay there. Let God use that. Let God use that. And here he has something. He doesn't really know what he has. He doesn't know what the future of it is, but he knows there's something going on in Israel at that time. Now, it could not be, though they did not have the internet, they did not have email and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those other yada yada. Though they didn't have that, whenever in a little country like Israel 70,000 people die, it's known throughout the country. And it's a tragic thing in the country. And there is trauma in the country. And nobody knows why they're dying, because nobody knows David's encounter with God and what God has done and what David did that caused God to judge him in that way. And though God judged David in a very specific way and dealt with him for his sin with Bathsheba, there was no sin of David that ever affected the nation the way that sin affected the nation of Israel. And here he is. And if you look in the scriptures, it says, Gad came and he said to him, go up and build an altar and, at the threshing floor of Ornan. And David lifted up his eyes, verse 16, and he saw the angel of the Lord stand between the earth and heaven, having a drawn sword in his hand, stretched out over Jerusalem. Then David and the elders of Israel, who were clothed in sackcloth because of all the people that were dying, fell upon their faces. And David said unto God, it is I. Is it not I that have commanded the people to be numbered? Even I it is that have sinned and done this evil indeed. But as for these sheep, what have they done? Let thy hand, I pray thee, O Lord my God, be on me and on my father's house, but not on thy people, that they should be plagued. And the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and set up an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Now, I want you to see this. With all the trauma that's going on in Israel, you know what Ornan does? He gets up and goes to work. He is in his place. Now, dearly beloved, I'm going to call on you to do something. There are some people, and you're probably not one of those because you're here tonight, but there are some people who use anything in the world to stay out of church, any excuse at all to stay out of church. Well, I can't go to church today. You know, Mama's got a toothache. Okay. You know, I can't go to church today because it looks like it's going to rain. I can't go to church today because of this. I can't go to church today because of that. And they'll take any excuse in the world to get out of going to church. Why don't you use church as an excuse not to do other things? You say, no, I can't do that. We're having church that night. Oh, no, that's on Sunday. I can't do that. I go to church on Sunday. That's what I do. Use church as an excuse to not do other things. Ornan got up and went to work. I like that. I like that. But here he is, and if we read further, we find that David went up at the saying of Gad. Verse 19 I'm reading, which he spake in the name of the Lord, and Ornan turned back. Now get the scene. Get the scene. Ornan turned back and saw the angel and his 4 sons with him hid themselves. Now Ornan was threshing wheat. And as David came to Ornan, Ornan looked and saw David, and went out of the threshing floor and bowed himself to David with his face to the ground. Now here is Ornan, and he looks one way, and he sees the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord is made visible till he can be seen by human eyes. And the angel of the Lord is there with sword in hand, stretched out over Jerusalem. And here is Ornan, and he looks and sees it, and all of a sudden he looks the other way, and here comes the king. And his sons with him are scared to death. You know why? Because the sword of the angel is raised over them, and they're next in line. Death is at their door. And here he is. He's between the two. What's going on? He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's caught in the middle of the thing. He doesn't know why it's happening. He doesn't know why the angel is there. He doesn't know why David is coming to his place. But he is in the unique place that uniquely belongs to God. Fact is, in Jewish lore, they say that creation took place at that spot. I don't think that's right, but they esteem it to that point. But he had no idea about anything like that, about any esteem of the place he was. But he's simply caught in the middle. And his sons are with him. And they said, that's it. I mean, they're hiding. And Daddy's out there looking at the angel and looking at David coming. And he's there and he says, what's going on? And all of a sudden, David begins talking to him. And he says to him, then said David, verse 22, unto Ornan, grant me the place of this threshing floor, that I may build an altar therein unto the Lord. Thou shalt grant it to me for the full price, that the plague may be stayed from the people. And all of a sudden, Ornan realizes, I can be part of stopping this problem. I can be part of it. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how it works, but there's something about this place that is where the plague that is in Israel, that is coming next to my boys, I can be part of putting a halt to it right here. I wish I could jump forward many hundred years until at that same place the Lord Jesus himself put a stop to the plague. But Ornan responds to him in verse 23. And Ornan said to David, take it to thee, and let my lord the king do that which is good in his eyes. Lo, I give thee the oxen also for burnt offerings, and the threshing instruments for wood, and the wheat for the meal offering. And look at the last 4 words of the verse. I give it all. Yeah. I give it all. He said, I'm a farmer, and I'm working with these oxen. They're the instruments of my trade. And here are the threshing instruments. After I've worked and after I've grown my crops and I've brought the wheat in here to be threshed, I give the instruments that I work with. I give the oxen to be offered as sacrifice. And I give the instruments that I work with. I give that for the wood to make on the altar where the fire will be built. And the wheat that I've threshed out, if you're going to offer a sin offering, and he understood a sin offering, the oxen were going to be offered as a sin offering. But after the sin offering, he said, I have the wheat here already threshed out. You're going to want to offer something for a thanks offering, for a praise offering. You're going to want that offering also. It's interesting how he said, here, I offer this for one offering, but I give this for the other offering. Take it all. I give it all. Now, you may not be too concerned about how it is in other countries and other people's lives, and how it may be in Newport News, or how it may be in England, or how it may be in Bolivia. But whenever the death angel is standing at your house, you'll give it all.
Yeah. That's right.
And if I can be part of stopping the plague,
yeah,
I give it all.
Amen.
I give it all. What does it mean to give it all? Well, it meant him. He said, here, this is it. Now, you know what David did? David said, no, no, no. I won't offer to the Lord of that which cost me nothing. Now, he didn't know that principle. He didn't know what was in David's heart. He gave it. He said, David said, I'll pay you full price. I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for it. And he paid him more than it was worth. For the place, for the oxen, for the instruments, and for the wheat. He paid him. He paid him full price. But he gave it all. He said, this is it. And that is exactly what it means to give it all. My daddy said, never I got big enough to kill a man with my hands, quit carrying a knife. But I'm old now. But it's not much of a knife. But I got 4 great-grandsons, the oldest of whom is 5. Do you know what I'd do if I saw that in Seth's hand? If he had that? I said, hey, boy, you give me that. You give me that. And if I said, give me that, and I started to reach for it, you know what he'd do? He'd tighten up on it. You know what I'd do? I might holler, Becky, come in here and hold this kid down. Because I'm going to take that out of his hand. And I pull his thumb up. And I take that finger up. And I hold it back. And by that time, his thumb's back down on it. You know how that is. And he keeps holding on until probably I'm going to have to hurt him to get that out of his hand. But I'm going to get that out of his hand because that's bad for him. He'll hurt himself. I will not hurt him nearly as bad as he'll hurt himself with that. You know, we're like that. Whenever God says, I want that. I want that talent you have. I want that personality I've given you. I want that strength of youth that I've given to you. I want that. And we say, mine. Mine. Now, what does it mean to give it all? I'm going to show you what it means to give it all. That's something that I like. I like. That's something that I like. You say, oh, preacher, you like money? You don't like money? That's something that I like. That's something that I like. Now here's what it means to give it all. It means I live like this. This is the way I live. Brother McCain said it this morning. You can have this, hold on to this. But it means I live with my hand open, palm up. Until, if God says, oh, I need that. He's got it. He didn't have to fight me. Because it's His. It's offered to Him. He says, I need that. Oh, Lord, do you need this? Not right now. Maybe I'll need that later, but not right now. But I walk through life with everything the Lord places in my hands, with everything the Lord entrusts me with. I walk through life with my palm up and my fingers open. Now, you know what I find? I find when He takes that, you know what He does? He puts some other back in there. Wow, how about that? Isn't that something? Had no idea that would happen. I give it all. Fingers open, palms up. Now don't miss your opportunity. Ornan didn't miss his opportunity. He had an opportunity to be part of stopping the plague in Israel. You can be part of stopping the plague in Newport News. You can be part of stopping the plague in Bolivia. You can be part of stopping the plague in England. Just like here, you're part of stopping the plague in Estonia, in Alaska, in Ghana, in Japan, in Romania. I can get emotional when I talk about Romania. I look and I see Brittany Szilagyi. What an awful name, Szilagyi. It's Hungarian. But God didn't send her back to the country of Hungary. You don't know this probably unless you read her prayer letters. But she's learning Hungarian and Romanian all at the same time. And she's learned it to the point now that people in Hungarian who speak Hungarian who don't really know Romanian, until she will interpret between Romanians and Hungarians. And God has given her that. You say, how do you know that about her? She's like my daughter. More like my granddaughter, but Brittany Szilagyi. In Chile, Japan, Spain, Nigeria, Cuba. And somebody's there where they can't tell where they are. You know what that means. You understand that. You can be part, and you are part of stopping the plague in Ghana, in India, in Germany, in Indonesia. Hard, hard, hard place. In Egypt, another hard place. Argentina, Costa Rica, Dominican, Philippines. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? That you, by letting the Lord take what you have, living with your palm up and your fingers open, saying, Lord, whatever I have is yours. Will you tonight, I'm just going to simply ask you this. Will you tonight open your fingers and turn your palms up and say, I give it all. You can have whatever you want. Heads bowed and eyes closed. Don't forget Ornan. Don't forget what he said. Lord, I really don't know. I know what you've done before. But I really don't know what you have for these people here tonight. But I ask that you will help them to give, to release ownership, for your glory, for your work, and for your purpose. Lord, I think of how we could see the plague of sin in this old world, that we wouldn't hold on to anything. Father, may we give that ownership even before it comes to our house. May we release that. Our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed. Let's stand together. Just where you are. Our heads bowed and eyes closed. Let's stand together. I don't know what it means, and I don't know what it would mean in your life. And this is hard. I'm going to ask a hard thing, but I believe it's what the Lord would have me do. You're great folks. You're great folks. I love your heart for God. I love your heart for missions. Get the song, I Gave My Life for Thee. My precious blood I shed, that thou might ransomed be, pardon be and ransom from the dead. I gave my life for thee. What hast thou given for me? We're going to sing it in just a moment. I wonder who among you here tonight who has not already said to God and said to someone else, I give my life to the Lord. I'm not talking about getting saved. I'm talking about giving your living, giving your life to the Lord. Would you walk down here and tell the pastor, I give my life to the Lord, and let him simply ask God to bless you? I give my life to the Lord. I'm going to ask a pastor to stand down front, if you will, pastor. And if you will, if you have not done that, but you'll do that right now, will you come do it? Will you come do it before we play, before we sing? I give my life to the Lord. I think we'll not have any singing right now. In the quietness of this moment, is God speaking to your heart? I give my life to the Lord. Now I wonder how many of you would say, before the Lord, as best I know my heart. That's kind of understood. But if you want to say it that way, you may say it like that. I give it all.
Yes.
Would you raise your hand? I give it all. I just give it all. I give it all. You may put them down. Lord, you see hands and you see hearts. Some things need to be said openly. But Father, they need to be said many times to you first and then said openly. Lord, I pray we'll not be embarrassed to openly confess our yieldedness to you. I thank you for these good people. I thank you for this pastor. I ask your blessing upon him. Continue to use him in a wonderful way. Lord, it's so refreshing to see the way you increase and enhance things that are given to you. And Father, sometimes when you thrust someone into a position, it's just amazing how you enable them when you put them in that position. And I thank you for that. Bless this church. Supply this last little bit to get over the goal, to take on these missionaries and continue the support of the missionaries.